Nearly 7 years after Jeffrey Epstein was found dead in his New York City jail cell, the New York Times is reporting on a possible note that Epstein allegedly wrote before a previous suicide attempt has been hidden away. According to this new report in the New York Times, a quote, cellmate said he discovered the note in July 2019 after Mr. Epstein was found unresponsive with a strip of cloth around his neck. Mr. Epstein survived that incident, but weeks later was found dead in the jail. Now, the Times reports that the alleged suicide note was sealed by a federal judge as part of the cellmate's criminal case. My source on this tonight is on the byline of this story, the investigative reporter for the New York Times, Steve Eder. And thank you, sir, for being here, because I want to start with how this possible note was recovered. The cellmate apparently says he found the note in his cell tucked into a graphic novel. How did it end up locked away by a judge?
Yeah, it takes a circuitous path, I guess, to being locked away from a judge. But basically, the short of it is that the cellmate says that he discovered the note, in the days after Epstein was found injured in his cell, right? And he turned it over to his lawyers. His lawyers, apparently, according to a document that we reviewed, tried to authenticate it, weren't able to right away. And then it ended up being moved over to his criminal case, not the Epstein case, but this other case that was playing out kind of parallel and ended up sort of sequestered from the Epstein proceedings in this whole other separate case for years now. And in that case, the judge put the letter, this purported note under seal.
And what's the situation with the cellmates, the attorneys authenticating the note? I mean, is it clear how they would even go about doing that?
Yeah, we don't know all the details. I mean, that's part of where we are with this. But what we understood, there was a document that was released as part of the millions of pages of records that have been released in over the last year, less than a year now, that indicates that there was an effort to try to authenticate the letter, and it indicates that it was authenticated. We don't really know all the details of what went into that. So the Times has gone ahead and made a request to the judge to have this letter, this note unsealed. And
what do you think will ultimately happen there?
We'll see. We'll have to see what the judge says. I mean, I think that certainly over recent months, there's been an incredible amount of records that have been released related to Epstein. I think one of the big mysteries of all of this has continued to be his time in jail, his death, and this is a piece of that, and it hasn't been fully explored. And so we'll see what the judge says and kind of how that plays out. But I think as we try to put the puzzle pieces together, this is certainly one of them that we want to be able to analyze.
Yeah, and I mean, this has been one of the most, scrutinized parts of Jeffrey Epstein, obviously, it's his death. When you look at the cellmate, the person's a former police officer serving 4 life sentences, charged with quadruple homicide. The Times talked to him. How credible was he?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, right? He certainly has his own case, his own interests to serve here. But the story that he told my colleagues, Ben Weiser and Jan Ransom, is consistent with some things that he has said over the course of recent months about this. There's some the chronology, the document does reinforce some of the same points that he was making about the letter. But we'll see. I mean, I think that's part of the process here is to to try to hopefully get a look at the letter, at this note at some point.
Yeah, I mean, it would obviously be fascinating for people to see this. I was thinking about this late last year. CNN had reported on a fake note that was attributed to Epstein that had been sent to the convicted sex offender, Larry Nassar. There are so many questions about his death, what happened before it, how it was handled by the Bureau of Prisons and the Justice Department. Why do you think this note, or what does it add to you in terms of significance as we look at that from an overall perspective?
Sure. I mean, look, this note carries some potential weight because if it can be authenticated, if it's real, it would potentially give some window into his thinking, into Epstein's thinking during those final weeks, right? There's been, so many theories, that have kind of spawned off of his death and his jailing, and this would be another piece of evidence that we'd be able to review and kind of look at what happened in totality there. And so that's why I think it's it's a piece of the puzzle is kind of the way I've been thinking of it.
Yeah, Steve Eder, excellent work by you and your colleagues. Thank you for joining us tonight.
We have now learned, according to the New York Times, as new reporting out this morning in part, that a suicide note purportedly written by Jeffrey Epstein in a Manhattan jail has been kept secret for nearly 7 years, locked up in a New York courthouse. And also this, the note was eventually sealed by a federal judge as part of a different cellmate's own criminal case, according to documents and interviews. That means investigators scrutinizing Mr. Epstein's high-profile death lacked what could have been a key piece of evidence. Was the committee aware of this?
No, and it's a shocking revelation and development, and I think it highlights the haphazard way that the investigation into Epstein took place over many years. We know the FBI didn't interview key figures very close to Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Clearly, there were documents that haven't been part of the investigation that should have. On the Oversight Committee, we're going to be talking in the coming weeks to one of the prison guards, Tova Noel. I think this revelation is going to lead to us wanting to talk to more folks at the prison to get a better, much more clear understanding of exactly what evidence exists and what took place.
Interesting. Congressman, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. John?
Yeah, a little more detail on that New York Times report on this purported suicide note written by Jeffrey Epstein that the Times reports is in a New York courthouse. The New York Times reports this stems from an incident weeks before his death. A cellmate says he discovered a note in July of 2019 after Epstein was found unresponsive with a strip of cloth around his neck. Now, again, this was before Epstein ultimately died. Epstein survived this first incident with the cloth when the note was allegedly found, but it was weeks later that Epstein was found dead by suicide, authorities say. A federal judge later sealed the note as part of that cellmate, the cellmate who allegedly found it, his criminal case. The Times is now petitioning the judge to unseal the note. The cellmate claimed the note said, quote, "Time to say goodbye." So the cellmate says Epstein wrote, "Time to say goodbye." With us now, CNN legal analyst and criminal defense attorney Joey Jackson. Counselor, great to see you. Before we get to the contents of the note and what it might mean, why is it locked up in a courthouse? Like, why wasn't it released as part of the Epstein document?
Yeah, so even before that, John, good morning to you. I think it's important to discuss whether it's authentic or not.
I want to get to that, but just tell me why it's locked up first.
So what happened is that it was under seal, and apparently judges have vast discretion with respect to whether they're putting something under seal, which means it's not in the public's view. It's not in the court records. If you go, and right now we have a system in federal court, state court too, where you can literally go into the docket and look at a variety of materials. Well, there are some materials that are sensitive that are not going to be in that docket because a judge in that judge's discretion will seal it. That's what they did here. Remember, this involves Tartaglione. Who's he? He's a person who was convicted. He was Jeffrey Epstein's cellmate, and he ultimately was convicted for four quadruple murder. And as a result of that, and them sharing a cell, he purportedly, that is, Mr. Tartaglione, found the note, reported it to his lawyers. He had about 18 of them, by the way, over the course of time. And they got involved, the lawyers did, with respect, hey, what should we do with the note? How do we authenticate the note? Should we put the note under seal? It became the subject of a lot of controversy. The attorneys argued it was attorney-client privilege incident to their communications and them seeking advice. And will Jeffrey Epstein claim that I actually, Tartaglione, his cellmate, killed him or tried to kill him? And so what do we do? And so the judge ultimately said it's going to be away from public view. It's going to be in a vault in the federal courthouse, and it has remained there for all this time.
Basically, a judge has it under his purview right now, involved in a separate case, which is why it was not part of the Epstein files per se. And the source here, this is from a cellmate charged with 4 murders, quadruple murder, who said he found the note and is the only person that we know so far to tell us what was on it. Time to say goodbye. So the credibility of the source?
Yeah, John, I think that's important to talk about. And at the time he was being charged, now he's convicted and he's serving these 4 life sentences. And so you have to question, right, what we call the veracity. Is it something that we could credit the fact that he said it? That I found this note, it said time to say goodbye. It had a smiley face. What am I going to do now? Burst out in tears. They found nothing, meaning indicating what was on that particular note. And what ends up happening, John, in courts of law is that there's something called a chain of custody. If you want to admit anything into evidence, we're not talking about an evidentiary proceeding here, we're talking about why it's not in the files and whether it's authentic, it has to be authenticated. And so, was it a forgery? Was it not? They were roommates for 2 weeks. Did he learn his patterns, right? Was he planning, that is Tartaglione, his cellmate, something nefarious against Epstein? And so I think we have to really evaluate and question the note and its authenticity and where it got to.
Very quickly.
Yes.
What role might it play in the entire Epstein investigation and cases? What questions does it raise about Jeffrey Epstein?
So I think it goes to state of mind. Remember that if it's something that he penned, right, there are many conspiracy theories concerning his death. Is he really alive now, John? Was this all a ruse? How could you lose sight of such a prisoner? Did he take his own life? Did somebody else take his own life? Was he suicidal? And so the note may indicate that he wanted, that is Mr. Epstein, to take his life. Indications are, however, that he was telling psychologists that I have every reason to live. I want to fight these charges. I'm entangled in my case. So I think it goes to what was he thinking at the time and whether or not he actually is dead or maybe not. There are all these theories out there.
He's dead. I don't think there's any question about whether he's dead. The question is whether or not it was a suicide. This may lend credence, if the note is real, to it being a suicide. Joey Jackson, good to see you this morning. Thank you very much.